Bishop Ming is going to join us. We're so thankful and honored that he's here with us in our East region. He's been to all three regions, except for the West Coast, because Dallas has crazy weather, right? So he got all his flights canceled, but he's been to all the regions, sharing. And so this morning, I'm going to hand it over to him, and we're just going to take a little bit of time to do a little Q&A and forum. And so, Bishop, take it away, sir.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Good to see you this morning. Wow, what an incredible time, an incredible encounter that we had last night. I was thinking about, Randy, the whole idea of getting the fire, keeping the fire, and taking the fire. And last night, as I laid down and was actually thinking about it, as I kind of drifted off to sleep, I thought, really the fire is not a thing. The fire is a person. And when you have the Holy Spirit, you keep the Holy Spirit, you take the Holy Spirit, thank you so much. There's a recognition that He empowers you, that He transforms you. In fact, I would say that prayer is not transactional, it's transformational. And I think sometimes when we talk about being a house of prayer, we think more in terms of transactions, when in reality, as you become a house of prayer, it transforms your life. It's transformational, it's relational. It's you and the Holy Spirit in unity, hearing the voice of God, following the voice of God. And I think last night we saw some encounters with God. And did you notice that it wasn't about what we were doing, it was about what He was doing. No one even had to have the microphone. It was just calling out on the name of the Lord, experiencing Him. And I don't know about you, but as I was spending time during that moment, that encounter, it was a selfish prayer, but it was, Lord, baptize me with the Holy Spirit again. I need a fresh baptism. Even though I would love to pray for someone right now, Lord, just baptize me, transform me. I want to experience a moment, an encounter with you. And I think sometimes, even as leaders, we're thinking about, okay, who do I need to pray for, or do I need to step up and say something at that moment, or what needs to transpire when it's just getting in God's presence and saying, God, baptize me, transform me. So what a wonderful night. Today we're going to do some Q&A, and I'm going to have the team they've been doing an excellent job with all the multimedia. Can we give them a hand and thank them? They're here this morning. Right here. Thank you so much. We're going to throw some of those ideas up there that we talked about yesterday. Actually, they're not ideas. I believe they're promises. We're just going to walk through some of those today, Randy and I. We had a town hall meeting at the Centennial that was awesome because it was for the younger group. It was 30 and under, and it was quite an incredible time as we heard from some of our younger leaders, which, by the way, did you know that every major revival that's happened in our world actually was catalyzed by leaders in their 20s and 30s? Martin Luther stepped up, tacked the theses on the Wittenberg door when he was 34. Evan Roberts with the Welsh revival was 26. Agnes Osmond Holy Spirit came down and she spoke with other tongues, actually spoke in Chinese for several days, couldn't even speak in English. William Seymour, incredible man, the Azusa Street Revival launched. He was 36 for 8 years. People from all over the world were transformed by the power of God at Azusa Street. I mean, over and over and over again, we have examples of younger leaders catalyzing revival. You know, Evan Roberts met with a group of young leaders at the Welsh Revival, which has really intrigued me here of late. And he prayed the prayer. They gathered together with these 20-somethings and prayed, Lord, bend us. And then the prayer became, Lord, bend me. And so our younger leaders are extremely important. I'm saying that because I loved what was said yesterday. The importance, Pastor Hilton was actually saying the importance of the future generations. And sometimes those of us here who are older leaders, we can almost become a little bit jaded and say, well, it's all about the younger leaders, and it's really, you know, what about us? What about our generation? What about, you know, the things that we want to do for God? And all of us know that the church is a multi-generational church, and it's not about every generation is fulfilling a role and purpose. But I think you reach a point as an older leader, and you recognize if there's going to be perpetuity in the kingdom, and there's going to be revival in the kingdom, I've got to invest my life in the next generations coming up. And, you know, honestly, I was telling my son this, and even Pastor Hilton this morning, that, you know, one of our greatest leaders in the PCG was Artie Hurd. He was elected when he was 34 years old as our general bishop, which means, you know, next week, that he was 20 years younger than I am. And, you know, people will talk to me and say, I'm so glad we have a younger leader, and I'm thinking, I am an older leader. I am, you know, 20 years older than Artie Hurd was when he was elected. But again, I think it's a great example of how the Pentecostal Church of God, even in the past, has understood the value of investing in our younger generations and leaders coming up. And so I don't want any leaders today to feel like whether, you know, wherever you are in age, that you're not valued or that you're not important, because you're just as important. But there is this thing of legacy. There is this understanding that our lives have to be invested in the next generations. And they may be the very ones in their 20s and 30s who end up catalyzing revival in a church or a district or our nation. They may be the very ones, like an Evan Roberts or a Flory Roberts or a Martin Luther, that is able to do that. And so Randy, you know, kudos to Randy and his team, Joe and Tina. These encounters have been taking place now for about a decade, right? And they started as a plea and a call for the next generation leader to come and understand that the PCG values them. And younger leaders, if you're here today, we want you to know that the PCG values you, and that you're important. How many came to the encounter last year? I see your hands. And the new ones this year? Wow, look at that. That's awesome. Last year, I shared the message, You Have a Dream, as the sequel to Martin Luther King Jr., because really now it's about the dreams and plans that God's placed in your life. So as we talk about some of these promises, as leaders, we put what God's laid in our hearts out there, but ultimately, revival in the PCG, or talking about what this next decade looks like in the PCG, it's really about you. It's about us, your dreams, the visions, the plans, the purposes of God that He places in you. And when those take fruition, then great things are ahead. Randy, I'm not doing much questions and answers. Do you want to add any to that before we get rolling here?
No, I just a cool testimony to follow up what you said. You know, when we first started out 10 years ago, it was the encounters were just for young people who had went through a discipleship curriculum called ILD. This year at our West Coast encounter, Joe nudged me on the stage and he said, "Hey, look over there to one side of the auditorium." And we looked down, and there was the young lady who, when we went to the West Coast, when we first started, we only had 2 students who went through the curriculum. But we went all the way out to the West Coast to do this event for them. Of course, we opened it up, and some of the other young people came. But when we sat down with that young lady, she was at that time like 12 years old, and just mentored her and asked what her dreams was. Here, a decade later, she was sitting in the auditorium with her husband as he led worship for the conference, and they serve as pastors in our movement and are just doing an amazing job. And he was just like, "Isn't it cool to watch what God does? You know, just when we make space for them and let them know, you know, that they're loved and valued." So, yeah.
Does anyone have any questions or thoughts or ideas about what we're talking about right now with multi-generational ministry and leadership? If you do, just stand up and state your question loudly so we can hear it. We'll try to repeat your question, and then we'll just kind of work through some Q&A. Anyone have any thoughts or questions on that? All right. Well, let's kind of dive a little deeper into the 4 promises that I talked about yesterday, beginning with global expansion. And what I do want to share with you, you see this kind of system called what, why, how. Obviously, there's a who and a when to all of these as we have leaders and teams that are beginning to function and work in these areas, do a deeper dive in some of these key ideas and points. As you know, you have to have the right leaders to be able to bring key imperatives about. And so as we kind of unpack these are general in nature, but there has to be implementation at deeper levels. You have goals that you set, but then you begin to work down through the layers until you're able to implement at the grassroots level. And I don't know about you, but in the past, I've had people vision cast or mission cast, and sometimes you almost feel like it's words and not actions, right? You hear the great things, but do you see it acted out or implemented? And so can I just inspire you with the notion that we're not just going to talk about it, but we're going to walk it out. God's going to help us not just to mission cast, but we're going to unpack layer upon layer until God's able to do it. Randy's a systems guy like I am, and you know, at our last meeting, he said, "Bishop, we need to come up with a scorecard on all of these so we can just kind of have some progress, show some progress on how we're doing on all these." So there's some things that we can develop, but global expansion, obviously our missions teams are working on this, and they're doing a great job, as I talked about yesterday. we've got to expand our global church. And if Bishop Kincaid were here, he would be able to give you testimony that in Nigeria, we just really opened up the country of Nigeria, and God's doing some incredible things. I met the bishop in Nigeria. They have a handful of churches, I believe. They had a handful of churches, and within a matter of just a short period of time, now we have over 100 churches in Nigeria, and they've met together and created a goal over the next decade of harvest, which is what the bishop actually called it himself without knowing where we were headed, that their decade of harvest in Nigeria, they want us to grow from 100 to 1,000 churches. So that's one example of several examples of what God's doing globally to just expand our global church. 2 years ago, we opened up a brand new field in Romania, and now we have over 100 churches in Romania. It's just, if you can imagine at that global conference in July, there's going to be an explosive, empowered moment where I almost prophetically see it as a Jericho moment where the walls come down, and unlike the story of Jericho in Scripture, the walls come down and people will scatter to the four ends of the earth and from the PCG from that moment, and literally reshape the landscape, the missional landscape of the PCG around the world. And so God's doing some really great things here. But any questions or thoughts that you may have concerning what God is doing in the PCG around the globe, because we are a global church with a global mission, not an American church with a global mission. Can I say that again? We are a global church with a global mission, not an American church with a global mission. Yes, the PCG was birthed in the United States. We will be the mother church, the father church, whatever. You know, there's a special place that the United States has in our global church. The general bishop is U.S. I'm recognized as the general bishop around the world, but we are a global church with a global mission. We have countries with nearly as many constituents, if not more, than in the United States. We've heard about Brazil. Brazil has over 60,000 members in that country alone. Ethiopia, 85,000 members. In Central America, we have, or Mexico, we have around 50,000 members. In the Philippines, we have over 60,000 members. You understand what I'm saying? In the United States, we have maybe 90,000. So we have countries that have just almost nearly as many members in the PCFG as we do in the United States. So we're a global church with a global mission.
Has there ever been an opportunity for adults to get into a mission trip? I know we offer it for the youth, and adults can go as chaperones. But we have Indian missions here in the United States. We have global missions throughout the world. And when adults can go and participate and meet the faces, they're more willing to give. They're more willing to take it back to their church. They're more willing to pray. It becomes more real to them. Have we ever thought about organizing adult mission trips?
I feel that's a great question. I don't know from the national level. It's probably been done, but I would say organically. Like I know when, in the past, when world missions directors have went over on certain trips that they are aware of in enough advance, you know, like, hey, we know next year we're going here. So for example, like the global trip, this was an event that was marked out far in advance, so they're advertising and welcoming people to come and helping coordinate those efforts. Is it something that every year they're like, hey, we're going to take 2 trips and invite adults to come? I don't know if that's really ever been done officially. It's probably more what I would refer to as organically. Like, hey, the churches that they might have close relationships say, hey, we're going to Africa. Do you got anybody that wants to go? They're welcome to join us. So I don't know if you feel any different. I mean, it's not probably been like an official, like, hey, every year we're taking 2 trips and any adults can come.
Yeah, I think that's for the most part true, but I think what we have encouraged, which I think is the best course, is local church missions trips that we can help sponsor and equip and train. So a church decides they want to go to Brazil, for example, and any of our churches can go to our mission fields and we'll help them to do that. So it's easier if a local church decides, we're going to open up and do a missions trip. Some of the churches, the church that I pastored, we did that. We would, take 2 or 3 missions trips a year and take people from our local church to one of our mission fields. And our world missions department would more than support and help local churches to do that. So, and even if there are a couple of local churches that would want to go together, or some churches in a particular section that may want to sponsor a trip, what it creates that way, rather than kind of an open invitation to anyone from any church, is there's ownership and buy-in from the local church. And when you get back, you set the church on fire, because you've got, maybe 3, 4, 5 people who went on the mission trip, and now they're together in that local church, sharing their testimony, sharing what God did. And if anything, it will ignite a fire for another mission trip, either that year or another year. And so I would encourage you to do that, but to sponsor it from the local church or from a couple of local churches in a section. And then we can help you, we can equip you, we can, such things as what to bring, how to connect with that culture. We have all of that information and training. In fact, we have talked about our intensives, actually offering a short-term mission trip training seminar at our intensives for local churches that would like to do missions trips. So if we can help you to do that, we probably won't sponsor it at the national level, but we'll welcome any local church that wants to take a trip. Yeah.
Sorry, I can't speak that loud. My husband and I joined with Pastor Reynolds, Rodney, and Angie. Oh, golly, several years back. But they connected with the Meltons in Honduras. And through that connection, they set up a work team and went down and did ministry and worked on buildings. And I don't, and it was easy to do. Just had to connect with the missionary and find out what their needs were. And we went. And it was an awesome time. I'll never forget that. We went more than once, and I enjoyed it. God bless
That's
you.
great. One of the ideas I would give to you is when we do these regional events or the global event, doing something in coordination with that, so your team's able to go and participate in the event or the conference, and then go before or stay after and connect with a particular country and work in that country. Then you get to see the benefit of the conference, and then also serving in a country. Great question, idea. Anyone else? All right, let's go to the second idea and talk a little bit about the minister's credential system, the online program, the benefits. Any questions or thoughts on this particular area from what was shared yesterday? It is so important for us to multiply our ministers. would say that the people you choose are more important than the systems you use. And of course, multiplying ministry is important for the PCAG to grow and multiply. Yes, right over here.
I know we have in our district a lot of ministers ready to go or feeling like, okay, what can we do next? And a lot of younger generation ready to go and what can we do next? As leaders, what can we do? Our bishop has us speak on Sunday nights and to practice of what we're supposed to do and have different things. But as far as the incentives to get people to do things and to get them motivated and to do the church planting and stuff like that, what is our next step in doing that?
No, that's a great question. I think having steps are important. Of course, engaging people at the local church level is really key. Getting them connected in their area of calling. If it's children's ministry or outreach or, I do think sometimes we think of ministry only in terms of what happens inside the local church when, there's an incredible understanding of Scripture that ministry also involves going outside the four walls of the church and that we're engaging people, in ministry there. But you really have to emphasize calling, preach on calling, talk about calling all the time. How do we engage people in our local churches with their calling? And I would define it this way. Calling is simply connecting your gifts to the kingdom. So, preaching is certainly a valued part of a calling, but everybody tends to want to preach from one pulpit. And the truth is that everyone has a pulpit. And everyone has a voice. And when you connect your gifts to the kingdom, you're walking worthy of your calling. 97, from what I understand, 97% of Christians will never actually receive income and financial support by working in the church. Only 3%. So if you're part of that 3%, you're blessed. That may seem like a negative statistic. It's actually a positive one, because now we know 97% of Christians are out there shining brightly in the midst of the world in every sector of our society, making a difference. And so it's connecting those people to their calling and teaching them what are your gifts and how can you connect them to the kingdom. And then out of that, you will have people who feel called to specific areas of ministry. If you're looking to kind of take next steps, if you're under 30, the Forerunner experience a first step for credentialing to exhorters. It's an online program. You've been hearing about it. But you can go through the Forerunner program. It's a 12-week program, and you will qualify for exhorters. So if you have young leaders that are under 30 in your church, connect them to the Forerunner so they can get their credentials with the PCAG and move forward that way. If you're over 30, that's what we're trying to develop here, is the online program for everyone, where there will be accessibility for ministerial credentials, and not just in the United States, but then it becomes a global opportunity for ministers around the world if we can do it in various languages. Next step, though, if the Forerunner doesn't work, is the ministry intensives that I talked about. If you've got people who want intensive training, it's not just, the intensives really are not just about events either. It's about coaching over a process of time. So if they feel called in a specific area, if it's pastoring or various ministries, church planting. That's really a next step moment. It's equipping them to do the work of the ministry. And so those are a couple of things that they can do. Obviously, getting them involved in missions and those types of things. We have internships in the youth ministry. We have a lot of things going on, but we've got to keep it so it's moving for all ages, and that's our challenge. So yes, sir.
I have a question concerning the global part of this because I love it. So if we get a credential system that has a commonality across the world, from district to district to section to continent, how then do we get all of these ministers to buy in to ownership? And just from a general level perspective, coming to our general conventions, then if we have a commonality in credentialing these ministers, if they come from other nations, do they have a say in our general assemblies and all of that? Is that what we're moving towards? Because, like I'm saying, I love this idea because just because they're from a different country doesn't mean they have a different calling or lesser than us in America. We should partner together, work together, hear what they have to say. They're doing great things over there. So I guess that's a question of mine.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would still contextualize that, though, by saying that every nation is autonomous. Every nation has their own conventions. Those that are growing and moving, like Brazil has its own convention, and they have their own cultural challenges that they're facing with their churches, and so we're not trying to create a convention moment for all the nations to come together and make decisions on bylaws. If you were at the Centennial this last year, it was really more about a conference than a convention. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why the regional conferences, continental conferences, global conferences, we're trying to establish that. We're still going to have our U.S., General Assembly that's really focused there. Of course, we want to invite the other nations of the world to come and be a part of that. But we'll have our own unique U.S. business that we'll have to deal with our general bylaws. The thing we want to be careful about, though, is we want our leaders from around the world to feel a part of that. And we are a delegate culture. Every church can bring delegates to our conventions and actually be involved in the business. And here's where I draw the comparison. If you bring 2 delegates from your church of 50, 100, whatever that is, and they're involved, well, if we have maybe like we did this last year, nations there with their bishop and their secretary, why not allow their bishop and secretary, usually mature leaders of an entire country, to sit in and be involved in the business? If you're comparing apples to apples, we've got delegates. Why not allow our presiding leaders of nations to actually participate? You're only talking about maybe 2 from every nation. So not all of our credentialed pastors and ministers from around the world would be involved in that. We're just talking about a representation like we already have. But the long answer is no, because every nation has its own convention and its own conferences. And in the U.S., we just want to be welcoming. For the first time, I heard our international leaders walking through the hall saying, "We feel so welcomed in the PCG." Tears coming down their eyes. When some of those leaders actually cast their vote for a general bishop, they had tears coming down their eyes because they were able to be a part for the first time of electing a presiding bishop in the Pentecostal Church of God. It was an incredible moment. Great question. Others on the credentials. Yes, sir, Bishop Powell.
My question is regarding the pastoral incentive. What would the pastors be incentivized, and what incentives are proposed?
Yeah, that's a good question, Randy. You can jump in at any time too. I think it's about more creating incentives to inspire our lead pastors, first of all, to engage in understanding that if we're going to grow, we have to get our ministers involved in their calling and be willing to take out credentials with the PCG. But you want to give some thoughts before I do?
Did you ask what specific incentives we're working on? Was that the question? And how? You're working on them. I mean, I'll answer what you've told me. Yeah, right. He likes to do that. Well, like Bishop mentioned yesterday, the benevolence program, I think, is one of the incentives that he definitely has a heart to care for our ministers who, I mean, when I took out credentials at 19 years old, I mean, a death benefit was nowhere on my radar. That would be depressing to me, right? But I do understand as ministers get older and wiser, they begin to think about those things. So that's one of the things they're working on, some type of retirement program or option, that the movement would love to either provide or at least make available. Right now we have absolutely nothing that our ministers, that is provided by the denomination or no opportunities for that. So if a minister says, hey, I would like to begin to plan for retirement and put something aside, what do you have available? The answer right now would be nothing. So that would be another desire, is to make some of those available so that those ministers can do that. So those are some of the incentives.
Yeah, and Randy's hit some really important points, and I want to come back to the pastor's incentive in just a moment. But on the benefit piece, I think that we can offer a blessing to our ministers in that way. And I'm just going to give some ideation here on things that I think are possible, but understand we're exploring and seeing what we can do. But like Randy said, for our younger ministers, when you talk about giving them a death benefit, that's not really exciting to them, right? But what if you gave them still a benefit? And you said, listen, if you hold on to your credentials and you stay with the PCAG and you hold them for 10 years. Say my son, who's ordained, he's 25. He holds his credentials for 10 years. At the end of that 10-year period, you have a choice. You could either save your $4,000 or $5,000 and put it toward a death benefit, or you can go ahead and take that benefit and apply it to debt reduction for your school education or for the down payment on a home. Now, you're creating an incentive, a blessing, so that the younger ministers, when they take credentials, know if they hold on to their credentials for 10 years, 20 years, and there's incentives with those, after 10 years, they can take their benefit and actually apply it towards something that's valuable to them in that age and stage of life. Those are the types of things we're exploring, where it's not just about a death benefit, it's about a financial blessing for our ministers at different ages and stages, and it's dependent upon their faithfulness and loyalty to the PCAG and holding their credentials. And we do it for all of our ministers, and we underwrite it through the IMC tithe. And we say to our ministers, we believe so much in tithing that we're going to tithe out of all of our income, outside of ourselves, and put it right back in our ministers. Those are the types of things on the benefit side that Randy's mentioned or alluded to, that we're telling our ministers, you're valuable to us. We care about you, and we care enough about you to invest in your future or invest in your present. And we do it through tithing. And we start by modeling tithing at the IMC level. That's an example. Let me talk real quick and then come to Pastor Hilton about your pastor's incentive thing, or the idea here. I would love to hear thoughts from the pastors and leaders here on how we can help you to become a leading voice for credentials. One of those areas is we need to reform our system so the tithe of the local minister stays in the local church. That's a big one. I think that would be a huge incentive for our pastors. Now, for our bishops who are here, right now, in your mind, they're probably thinking, wow, how could we do that? But if it is a choice of the church, and the church would say, you know what, we're going to start tithing to the PCAG because we believe in it. Doesn't have to be a bylaw, but the church says, we're going to start tithing. The district could then say, okay, if you're going to tithe, then here's what we're going to do in covenant with you. The minister's tithe will stay in the local church. Only the lead pastor's tithe will continue. And we'll provide a provision in our bylaws that if a local church decides to tithe, we will allow that minister's tithe to stay in the local church. Then a portion of that tithe goes to district operations. What I'd like to see happen is a portion of that tithe would go right back to the local church, maybe 4%, that would go to the retirement of the pastor and the pastoral staff. So the PCAG is investing back 4% right into the church because they're tithing into that local pastor's retirement. My dad pastored the same church for 33 years. And there was no opportunity for him through that local church to really invest in his retirement. He had to find ways to do that. So if the PCAG could do that on behalf of that local pastor, then that would be exciting, investing in the retirement. And then 1%, the first fruits, the tithe of the tithe, 1% of the tithe of the local church could go to the IMC. So now we have a tithing system where the local church is tithing to the district. The district maybe gets 5%, 4% goes back for the retirement, a tithe goes to the IMC, the minister's tithe stays in the local church. And then the district looks at tithing out of the tithe. So out of all the tithe of the ministers, rather than just the district tithing the district bishop's tithe and the district secretary's tithe, the district looks to tithe out of the tithe. Hallelujah. I'm getting excited. But it's all voluntary. We're not mandating it. And it's only happening by choice and out of belief. So as the local church chooses to tithe, the district, then that kicks in the whole incentive covenant agreement with the local church. And then, other things can be done, like waiving district convention fees or general convention fees if that pastor is recruiting ministers in the local church. So we cease being an assessment-based financial system, and it turns or reforms to becoming a biblical tithing system. Amen. Did I say that clearly, Pastor Hilton? And then right over to Bishop Ryan. He had his hand up now, and then I'll get right.
Bishop, this is a question that may open a can of worms, but it's a question talking about benefits and incentives. And with the mark, I don't know if this is regulated by state to state, but I wonder if the Pentecostal Church of God, if it would come to a place where we had the buying power by global presence to tap into health benefits, a group policy on a large scale that local pastors and ministers could align themselves with, not necessarily a Medishare type program, but because health expenses are so high that local churches sometimes cannot even offer health benefits to their pastors, ministers, and unless you work outside in another job, a lot of pastors, they don't have health benefits, but their spouse gets to do their work. That's how they're able to carry the health insurance. So by speaking of incentive, would it be, has it ever been thought, or is it even a possibility, and is there a sister organization that's doing it, where you can tap into, as a pastor in Indiana, I can tap into the global or the general health covering, pay my own insurance through it, but have a great deep pocket discount because I'm part of something bigger global, as far as health benefits. I don't know if that's ever been considered.
No, absolutely. Actually, we're dialoguing about it now. We're looking at options. This whole financial solutions premise has to happen. And that's the great joy of being part of a greater, larger group, is because you have more negotiation options with healthcare providers. So health insurance, disability insurance, there's several things that we can explore and not, again, mandate it, but offer it as an option where our ministers can opt into that healthcare provider or that insurance provider or that retirement option, a denominationally sponsored 403B retirement option. And our pastors and ministers can do that. And so they can go to a one-stop shop on our website, lays it out. We have, connection points relationally as well by phone, helping pastors and ministers to be able to have those resources. Those are resources, when we talk about ministerial benefits for all ministers, that we should be offering. Not that all ministers have to do it, but we should be offering those. So I don't think you're off target at all. Bishop Ryan had his stood up, and then we'll be right back there. Yes. Love it. The questions are flowing. Randy, you get the next question.
In reference to the district rebating the tithe back, I don't know if rebating is the right word, but to the local church from the ministers. In our district, and it's been this way for a very long time, I'm paid a percentage, a very good percentage. Actually, it's 75% of ministers' tithe, which some months is very good, other months it's mediocre, but I think one of the greatest things I personally have ever done as a bishop when it comes to the money thing, one of the vision things that we wanted to do was just change things up with the financial process, just financial realignment, I guess you could say. So at one of the worst moments financially in our district, when I was appointed to that position, shortly into that, I started rebating. That rebating word is not a good word. Returning to the local church, and there was probably at one time 7 or 8 ministers I was doing this to. They would tie it to the district, but I would give my 75%. I would return it back to the church. I was discouraged from doing that by several people, including my sweet wife here, because it was a good bit of money. And I still do that. I still do that because the long-range plan is that we operate from the district position on a 25%, and that the 75% goes back to the local church from all of our ministers, and the bishop at some point would receive a portion of that 25% for his salary. So when I started doing that, I had probably at one time up to 8 ministers that I was doing that to every month. That was a good chunk of money. That was my salary coming out of my pocket. But fast forward, because sometimes you look at the immediate circumstances and you say, this is absolutely crazy for me to do this. And that's basically what I was told. And I said, well, I'm absolutely sure this is what I'm going to do. And sink or swim, this is what we're going to do. But fast forward now, these years, I can tell you, and I'm not being braggadocious about it. I'm just saying that God has honored that, and I am the highest paid bishop that we have ever had in Georgia, and I'm still giving back to the local church. I think there's 6 or 7 ministers now, but the plan is at some point, and I had my secretary a few years ago. I said, at our current financial base, how many ministers would we need to operate on the 25%, which would include a salary for the bishop and the other salaries that we have? He said, well, we would need about 75 ministers to do that. Georgia's never had 75 ministers. Matter of fact, we have about 31 or 2. But that was when I took office, when the dust settled, I think there were 17 left. So we've more than doubled that. We had 7 churches left. 7 churches left. We're on the verge of having our 13th church now. And I think it all spins on the fact of being able and willing to give back to that local church. Now, I could be very selfish and just hold on to that $800 or $900 every month. That'd make me a nice car payment. You know, I can look at it that way. But in reality, seeding back to that local church has been one of the best things as a bishop that I have ever done when it comes to the financial. So we are already moving in that direction, and our ministers are applauding that. And I'm very excited. I may not be around when it really comes to fruition, totally, but at least we have started it and moving in that direction. So I think it's something that we certainly want to do in Georgia, and I'm excited about participating.
That's great. The bottom line is God's word works, and tithing works. And when you tithe, you're blessed. Sometimes you don't know how God makes up the difference or establishes the blessing, but tithing works. And I believe if we invest back in our ministers, if we invest 3 or 4% back into a local church, they're going to be blessed. The PCG is going to be blessed. The pastor The staff's going to be blessed with retirement. The district, the 5% that the district would receive probably will be more than whatever the tithe would be from the ministers of the church. So the district will be blessed. Yeah, we had a question back here.
Yes, I have a quick question about your online credential training. Last year I came to the Encounter Conference for the first time and heard about the Forerunner experience. I completed it in the beta program. I just was credentialed this last couple of weeks. So,
yes.
Thank you. And through that, though, it really sparked, I wanted to learn more. And going through that, it really, put this hunger and thirst in me to further my education. So my question is, and I'm 30, so now this September I'll be 31 and out of the Forerunner age group. So with your online credential training, will I be able to advance my credentials to the next levels?
Yeah, that's the whole reason why we've got to accelerate our pace with this, because you should be able to come out of the Forerunner experience, go right to licensing with a very similar online experience. And it's going to take us, some months here to get this in place, and so don't wait. Go ahead and move forward with the license and the process we have now. But our hope is that it will be an experience that lends continuity to what you've experienced with the Forerunner. And so we're excited because that's what we want to provide for you, because you had a great experience with it, and we want to keep that going.
I could misunderstand this, but I'm thinking that whether you're exhorter's license or ordained, the credential fee is all the same. Is that correct? So if you're talking about incentives, and you're wanting younger people to become exhorters, has there been any thought to making it a cheaper fee for them annually? Because as a 19-year-old, I would not have been able to pay $300 and some a year. I could maybe pay $50 a year, and I'd be willing to take that step of faith. Has there been any thought or talk about that?
Yes, thanks for that. And that's great input. That's what, we're looking for input. And we know that $30 a month for the younger ministers, that's tough. And especially if you feel like you're paying $30 a month and you don't feel like you're really getting much in return. Now, I would say that there is a value system in place that you are getting in return. You're part of a movement, a global movement that has approved you and affirmed you as a credentialed minister to be able to function in that role. So, when I took credentials, that was important to me. It wasn't necessarily what financial blessing I was getting. I just wanted to identify with the PCG. That was my family, and they valued me to say, we approve you and affirm you in the ministry. But we also know that providing benefits and incentives are important. As one of the airlines says, membership has its privileges. And so we want to provide that. And so we have talked about at least dropping the fee for the exhorter. Because if we could drop that fee in half to $15 for the exhorter, that would be a real help to our exhorter ministers. And the exhorter really should be an intro-level credential, where that's where you discover, your calling, you're dipping your foot in the water. You may never be in full-time vocational ministry, which is fine, but it's kind of that driver's permit idea. You can drive, but you're not licensed to be a pastor, or you're not fully invested in the ministry. So for that level, we should look at reducing the price. That's going to take some discussion, and also, the tithing, as we begin to tithe and we can see our way to do that, that might be something at a later point that we could do. We definitely don't want to increase the credentials. We want to decrease them, especially for the exhorter. Some of our sister organizations do that. Their exhorter level is half of what their license and ordination level is. You have anything you want to add to that, especially for the
right now you get a card, and if you punch out that little key tag, and if you take it to like Myers or Kroger's or Walmart and scan it, they'll just laugh at you, right? It's not a discount card. It's just there for you to put on your key tag. But anyways, one thing that I would add is I think the incentive things are great. But one thing we've talked about, and we've talked about with our students at Messenger College, is there is value. So for example, like on our staff at the college, Dr. Candace Rayburn, who serves as our Vice President of Academic Affairs, she's actually a lawyer. And even though she doesn't practice law right now, she still maintains all of the groups and associations she's a part of. Because for her, and she gets probably no perks, no benefits from that, but she pays into it because it's a part of what she's done. It's almost the same for like alumni associations. You're like, I am proud to be a part of that. And I think some of that as well for our young people that are coming up is, yes, we do want to work on incentives for them, but we also want to instill in them there is value in saying, I feel called of God to be an ordained minister. And when I hold this card, it's not so that I can get a discount to here or there. We'd love to provide that and we want to work on that. But what you're saying is, I am a part of a global movement that has dedicated our life to spread the gospel, and I'm very proud of that. And I'm honored to be a part of that. So that as well is some of that, as well as helping, instill that into our young people. Excellent question.
I think we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to jump right to the last idea of the church multiplication. I hope that you have seen the importance of how we need to be helping our local churches and our local pastors and leaders. One of the incredible challenges that you have in overseeing leadership is how do you help our local churches and local pastors? And we really feel like this area should already be happening in the PCG. We should already have a church multiplication ministry that is coaching our pastors and leaders for church growth, that is planting churches, that is training in ministry. And so we're behind the curve here. We've got to catch up. The AG already has a church multiplication department. That's what they call it. We and other sister denominations have that. We've got to catch up. We've got to walk alongside our districts and our local pastors. So again, I want, if you haven't wrote it down, the dates for the next encounter. January is the 22nd, 23rd, that weekend, where we're going to launch our ministry intensives right here at the regional encounters and train in those 3 areas leadership and launch in 5 districts a church multiplication plan that will coach 20% of the pastors in the district, plant at least 1 church in the district, and partner with them in a district meeting to bring ministry training to their districts. So we're developing the team to do it, and we can't do it for all the districts yet. We're going to start with this pilot program, but our hope is to kind of learn and grow through that so that at the end of 2021, we'll be able to go to the North Central District, Indiana, all the districts that would want us to come alongside. And some of you may be thinking, well, why do you start with just 20% of the churches in the district? Because it's not mandated. It's just voluntarily coming to the district and saying, what pastors in the district are sold out enough to grow their church that they want to ask for coaching from the International Mission Center to help them grow the church. You're not going to have probably 50% or 80% of the churches wanting that. But you probably will have 20% where you'll have the Pareto principle. You focus on the 20% that really want to do it, and you come alongside of them and help coach them. So we'll start with 20%, and when those churches really start growing, I think the other 80%, some of the 80% will want to get involved after they see what God's really doing in the 20%. So we're going to start there. Again, the next ministry intensive at the IMC, it's the only one this year, is the 23rd through the 26th of March. Come in, it's a Monday night through a Thursday at noon. You'll get these tracks of training. Go to the website and wearepcg.org or pcg.org, and you'll be able to get information on the ministry intensives. The October intensive will be moved back to the encounters for January of next year. And then every year after that, we'll be doing one intensive a year in the fall. But please check that out. It's going to be a moment where we just launch church multiplication. We start planting churches. The Church Plant Initiative, CPI, planting churches again to multiply the PCG. I also want to ask you to put one more month on your calendar. The month of September is the month that we're calling Impacting Eternity Month. And we felt like as a movement that there should at least be 1 month out of the year that we come together and we impact eternity together. We're all doing different things through the year, different outreach events, but in that month of September, we're going to do our Impacting Eternity Month, where we're asking every person in the PCG to share their faith. Did you know that the statistic, Marty gives the statistic in the United States that 90% of Christians never share their faith at one time? That blew me away. 90% of people sitting in our local churches in the United States never share their faith one time. So in that month, we're going to ask every person to share their faith with someone. Every church to do an outreach in their community, outside the walls of the church, whatever that looks like for you and your community. Every church in every district or every nation to do an inner city mission that month. So in the month of September, anytime, every person sharing their faith, every church doing an outreach, and every nation or every district doing an inner city mission, possibly to prepare for a church plant. So please put that on your calendar again. We have resources for you. Be looking for them. Over the next few months, you'll be able to go to the website, pull off sermon outlines, pull off brochures to put in the hands of your people on how to share their faith. There'll be resources there'll be a video promoting Impacting Eternity where you can show it to your congregations. We want to resource you. We want to put things in your hands so that together we can impact eternity. It's wonderful to impact this world, but how many want to impact eternity? Did you know when you reach one person for Jesus, you impact eternity? Winning one person changes eternity, impacts eternity. And our missions department is working on impacting eternity in other nations with the goal, we're not going to be able to get it done this year, but with the goal being every month of the year, a nation takes a particular month to impact eternity. We want to see 12 months a year all over the globe where nations are impacting eternity in the Pentecostal Church of God every month of the year. But for the United States, it's the month of September. So write that down and get involved. Thank you so much. I think I did more talking than actual questions and answers. But lots to share with you. What does the next decade look like? I hope you're catching a glimpse of that. What God is doing, that one mission, one movement is going to help us to impact eternity for the kingdom. So, Father, thank you again for being in a new year, of a new decade, of a new century. God, for what you're getting ready to do in this decade of harvest. We want to depopulate hell and populate heaven. We want to impact eternity for your kingdom and your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Bishop. Can you give Bishop a hand for joining us this morning? Wonderful. You can stand up. We're going to take about a 4 or 5 minute stretch break.